defender doesn't trust a single observation, a single alert, or a single claim without some form of confirmation, and that mindset applies directly to AI models. Model validation is the process of checking whether a model's performance claims hold up beyond the data it was trained on, and for security, it is one of the most important safety practices you can apply. Without validation, you can deploy a model that looks impressive in a controlled test and then fails quietly in production, either by missing threats or by flooding the team with noise. Validation is not about proving a model is perfect. It is about understanding how it behaves, where it breaks, and whether it is reliable enough for the risk you are taking by using it. Security AI Plus expects you to reason about validation like a defender, meaning you think about adversarial environments, changing conditions, and the cost of mistakes. This episode will make 3 validation ideas feel concrete: holdouts, cross-validation, and drift awareness. If you can explain these ideas in plain language and connect them to risk, you will be able to navigate many exam scenarios that talk about testing models, comparing models, or responding to performance changes. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Start with the simplest concept, a holdout set. A holdout set is a portion of data that you keep separate from training so you can test the model on examples it has not seen. The purpose is to simulate the real world, where the model must make decisions on new inputs. If you train and test on the same examples, you can fool yourself because the model may have effectively memorized patterns specific to those examples. A holdout test gives you a more honest estimate of how well the model generalizes. In security, honesty matters because overconfidence can lead to unsafe reliance and automation. A holdout also forces you to think about data leakage, meaning you must ensure the holdout really is separate and that no features sneak in that reveal the answer indirectly. The defender mindset here is that you assume evaluation can be tricked, even unintentionally, so you build separation and controls to keep it clean. In an exam scenario, if someone claims a model is excellent based only on training performance, your safest instinct is to want a separate holdout evaluation. Holdouts get more powerful when you think about time, because security data has a timeline and the world changes. A common defensive approach is to create time-based holdouts, meaning you train on earlier data and test on later data. This mirrors what deployment will look like. The model learns from the past and then faces the future. Time-based holdouts help reveal whether the model is relying on patterns that no longer hold. They also help you see early signs of drift, where the data distribution changes over time. If a model performs well on random holdouts, but poorly on time-based holdouts, it might be learning patterns that are stable within the dataset, but unstable across real-world time. In security, that's a red flag because attackers, systems, and user behavior shift. Exam questions might describe an organization using last year's logs to train a detection model, and the best validation approach often involves holding out more recent periods to see if performance holds up. This is what it means to validate like a defender. You test the conditions you actually fear, not just the conditions that make you look good. Cross-validation is the next idea, and it exists because a single holdout split can be misleading. If you happen to choose a holdout portion that is unusually easy or unusually hard, your performance estimate can be skewed. Cross-validation reduces this risk by repeating the train test process across multiple splits of the data and averaging the results. In simple terms, it is a way of asking, does this model perform consistently across different slices of the data, or is it lucky on one split? Consistency is a defensive priority because consistent performance is more reliable than a single impressive result. Cross-validation also helps when datasets are small, because it lets you use more data for training overall while still getting multiple tests. You don't need to memorize specific cross-validation variations for Security AI Plus, but you should understand the principle. You want to reduce the chance that your evaluation is an accident of how the data was split. In an exam scenario, if data is limited and you need a more stable performance estimate, cross-validation is often the right concept. Even with cross-validation, The defender mindset says that validation must match the risk and the deployment context. If your environment has distinct segments, like different business units, different networks, or different user populations, you should validate across those segments rather than assuming one average score tells the story. A model might perform well overall but fail badly in a segment that matters most, such as privileged accounts, critical systems, or remote access. This is a common security trap because averages hide extremes. Validation like a defender means you look for where the model is weakest and ask whether that weakness aligns with high-impact risk. It also means you test for realistic noise and edge cases, because attackers live in the edges. If an exam scenario mentions that a model works well in one department but not another, the right answer often involves segmented validation, revisiting training data coverage, or adjusting the evaluation strategy. The underlying concept is that validation should reveal risk, not conceal it behind a single number. Holdouts and cross-validation are about testing generalization at a point in time, but drift awareness is about accepting that time keeps moving after deployment. Drift is when the data the model sees in production changes compared to the data it was trained and validated on. In security, drift is common because software updates change logs, new services change traffic patterns, seasonal work patterns change behavior, and attackers adapt their techniques. Drift can cause performance degradation, meaning the model starts making more false positives or more false negatives. Sometimes the degradation is obvious, like a sudden flood of alerts. Sometimes it is subtle, like gradually missing more threats. Drift awareness means you treat validation as ongoing, not a one-time project. A defender doesn't install a firewall and then never review logs again. Similarly, you don't validate a model once and then assume it stays valid forever. In exam terms, if a scenario describes performance changing over time, drift should be one of your first hypotheses. There are different kinds of drift you should be aware of conceptually. Input drift is when the distribution of inputs changes, like different traffic volumes or new log formats. Concept drift is when the relationship between inputs and outcomes changes, like attackers changing behavior, so the old patterns no longer predict maliciousness. Label drift can happen when labeling practices change, like a new incident response process that categorizes events differently. You don't need to use these labels on the exam unless they show up, but you do need to understand that drift can come from multiple sources and can affect evaluation. The defender mindset is to ask, what changed in the environment, and how would that change affect the model's assumptions? If a model suddenly flags far more events after a system update, that might be input drift rather than a sudden crime wave. If a model suddenly misses a class of attacks after adversaries adapt, that might be concept drift. Recognizing these possibilities helps you pick responses that focus on revalidation and investigation rather than blindly trusting the model's output. A practical defender approach to drift awareness is to monitor both model performance and model inputs. Monitoring performance means tracking metrics like precision and recall over time, ideally with feedback from investigations. Monitoring inputs means tracking whether the data feeding the model still looks like the data it was trained on, such as distribution changes in key features. If you only monitor outputs, you might miss that the environment changed until the model fails. If you only monitor inputs, you might detect change but not know if it matters. Good governance links both, and it includes thresholds for when to trigger review, revalidation, or retraining. In an exam scenario, you might be asked what to do when you see signs of drift. The strongest answer often includes validating the model on recent data, investigating environmental changes, and adjusting the model lifecycle plan rather than simply tweaking a threshold without understanding the cause. Defensive validation is cautious, evidence-driven, and tied to operational impact. Another important validation concept is avoiding leakage and ensuring that evaluation is realistic. In security data, it is easy to accidentally include features that are only known after an incident is confirmed, such as a ticket resolution field or an investigation outcome tag. If such a feature is present during training or evaluation, the model may learn to rely on it, producing unrealistically high performance. Then, in production, the feature might be unavailable or meaningless, and the model collapses. A defender thinks about this because it is similar to relying on information you wouldn't have at the time of decision. Validation must reflect the information available at decision time. The exam may describe a model that uses fields that are populated later, and the safest reasoning is that the validation is flawed and the model is not truly predictive. This is also why time-based evaluation often matters, because it respects what was known at each point. Realistic validation prevents your organization from building a brittle defense system that only works in hindsight. It's also worth understanding that validation is connected to trust boundaries and adversarial behavior. In an adversarial environment, attackers can intentionally manipulate inputs, attempt to poison data, or probe the model to learn how it behaves. Validation cannot eliminate these threats, but it can help you understand how resilient the model is. For example, if a model's performance collapses under small input perturbations, that suggests vulnerability to adversarial manipulation. If performance is heavily dependent on a small set of features, that suggests attackers might target those features. Defender-style validation includes thinking about robustness and not assuming that future inputs will be benign. Even if an exam question does not mention attackers explicitly, the security context implies adversarial pressure, and the best answers often reflect the need for ongoing monitoring and layered controls. Validation is one layer in that broader defense strategy. To keep all of this straight, remember the core purpose of each concept. Holdouts are about honest testing on unseen data, separating training from evaluation to reduce self-deception. Cross-validation is about reducing the luck factor in evaluation by testing across multiple splits and looking for consistent performance. Drift awareness is about accepting that deployment changes the game, so you monitor and revalidate as the environment evolves. Together, these practices prevent a model from becoming a silent point of failure in your security program. The exam will often present scenarios where an organization wants to deploy a model quickly or trusts a single metric too much, and your role is to bring the defender mindset back into the conversation. That mindset says, show me robust evidence, show me realistic evaluation, and show me how you will detect when conditions change. When you can reason that way, you're not just studying for security AI+, you're learning how to treat AI systems like any other security-relevant component, with healthy skepticism, clear validation, and continuous oversight.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.